Hello, and welcome to part two of our Star Wars conversation here on the Todd and Taylor Show. If you missed it, we have a part one to this episode. We talk about everything from the prequels to the original trilogy to The Force Awakens that's coming up. How we got into it when we were kids. So I strongly suggest you check out part one before you jump into this. No spoilers or anything. Not any more than every other blog and crap is spoiling things for you, but it just might make what we're about to talk about make a little bit more sense. But I'm going to leave you to that, and we'll just jump in after the comment I made, which ended episode one, or part one of this Star Wars episode. So thanks very much. Enjoy. Well, and it speaks so much to that one of the most famous lines of Han Solo saying "I know" to Princess Leia when she says "I love you," it came straight from Harrison.
Yeah,
like he was like, the script was "Say I love you too," and he was like, "That's stupid. Like, this guy would never say that."
Yeah.
So, that
speaks to the collaborative sort of vibe that was going on. By the way, Willard Huyck directed Howard the Duck. Lucas was a producer.
Nice. Well, I think there's a funny part of that is I think there will persist to be a stigma of, like, if you say, well, he's not a director that works with people really well. But I think at this stage of movie directing, that does not need to be that is not an insult. There are directors that are going to work great with effects and big budget, like space battles and stuff, and they're not going to have the touch with human to human interaction, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And maybe there was just this kind of feeling of like, no, we got to let George do it all, rather than having a co-director that's going to work with humans. Anyway, all that is a larger setting to the point of, I don't think Jar Jar was ever a real actor standing next to them. I could be totally wrong about that, but maybe that's just a terrible impression I take away from it.
I think that's true.
I don't think they had any idea what he would look or sound like.
Because I remember, I say this because when Andy Serkis did Gollum for the first time, everyone made a huge deal about how he was there on set with them, and he had the suit on, and then he had to go back and redo the same scenes again for the mocap stuff.
Yeah,
never they said it like it had never been done that way before.
Right.
And you go back and watch Phantom Menace, and like, there's a lot of eye lines.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. It's just like they could be looking at anything. Like, it's really hard to see. I mean,
yeah. And that's totally what I think, where part of it breaks down is like, there's not a human being there. He's not saying the lines in that accent to them.
Yeah.
So not reacting in the right way. And, so it just kind of gets tacked onto the end. Everything about that character is wrong. Like, it just doesn't have the right feel to whatever the movie was that he was trying to shoot. Which I think is so. Then the other thing I was going to say, which gets us totally off base, is there's a Redditor who has advanced the craziest conspiracy theory about Jar Jar, which we'll have to put in the show notes somewhere. But it is amazing, and basically argues that Jar Jar was a secret master Jedi or Sith or something, and was such a master of mind control that we, the viewers, didn't even see what a master manipulator he was. But he has all this evidence of, like, he's from Naboo, which is the same place that what's his name is from, Palpatine, and this great point, which is like in Star Wars, where generally like one planet is all one species, like the Wookiee planet or whatever, to have two different, like if you grew up on the same planet and you were different species or races or whatever, like you were basically like neighbors because generally, like, people were spread out by planets. So it's like, of course, Palpatine knew Jar Jar. And so he goes on this long, very involved conspiracy theory about this. And then he gets some of the commenters on it give him this additional ammunition. I don't know if it's in the original post or if it just comes from the commenters that, Lucas talks so much about how he had to rework even his story for the next two movies, given the vitriolic reception that Jar Jar received. The original poster's conspiracy is that Jar Jar was meant to be the Phantom Menace and the Dark Lord of the Sith that raises up like through those 3 movies, but he was so hatefully received that Lucas had to like rewrite that. So of course I'm like, oh, I just want to see if that was really.
Well, you know what I told you, but who that Reddit poster actually was, right?
Yeah.
It was George Lucas. I'm convinced I should write a Reddit about how that Reddit and all the subsequent responses are Reddit profiles created by George Lucas. Just finally having washed his hands of Lucasfilm, he was sitting there one night just bored going, I'm going to tell them what's what. And he gets on there and just starts creating this country. He's like, if it's the last thing I do, damn it, they're going to love Jar Jar. There's going to be respect for Jar Jar.
In this one subversive Reddit that like totally retcons the whole universe so that we're all scratching our chins going, did we miss something?
I have this vision that George closed the deal. He signed the paperwork. They took the photos. He went home. He had a celebratory shot of whiskey. He's sitting there and he's sitting in his library and it's he's pondering his life. He's like, God, what am I going to do now? I don't have a job to go to. And he's looking across the library at a poster of Jar Jar hanging on the wall. And it's just all the hated, the voices of everybody calling him an idiot and hating, like they're running through his mind. He's like, you know what? Screw those people. And he gets on Reddit and that's just, he just starts typing. He just starts typing for days. And then finally his wife comes in, George, are you going to come to dinner? No, not yet. I'm not done yet. And just keeps going. That's just like the last will and testament. He's going to write it on Reddit, make sure it's heard.
Just given the billions that he has made for companies with Star Wars over the years. If that really were his intention, I can't believe that he wouldn't go back and just say, you know what, we're making special editions of episodes 2 and 3 where Jar Jar really does turn out to be, the Phantom Menace.
I'm surprised he didn't. One of the conditions of the deal, because they're doing this new trilogy and then they're doing these supplemental movies. I'm surprised one of the conditions wasn't Jar Jar gets his own movie. You have to do a Jar Jar exclusive Jar Jar movie to get, if you want it, you have to. That's what you have to do.
Well, the conversation about Jar Jar, I think, leads into this one thing that I wanted to take us into the new movie and also talking about like one of these questions you had on here about what makes them better and stuff like that. Is that like I was saying, I think that first movie in Jar Jar, it really felt like, oh, this is for kids, even though those maybe the prequels 2 and 3 weren't really for kids. There's that feeling. That's just a feeling I took away from it. It was like, oh, this universe is for children, and I'm not.
You know what though? You just nailed why I think why I like. I don't think 3 is a perfect movie by any stretch, but it definitely, of all the prequels, it feels the most connected to 4, 5, and 6, largely because it really does leave us in the universe that we know, but it's the least kid friendly. You just nailed it. It's the least kid friendly movie. And I think because it takes itself that seriously, it does feel like there's a stronger connective tissue creatively to what's going on. I
was going to say, I think that's part of this anticipation for 7, for Force Awakens, is because we're getting that feeling of this is for both the kids who are going to be introduced to the Star Wars universe through this movie and for the adults who grew up with the other ones. That's just the feeling I take away from it, which is like, I can go watch it. I'm going to love it. My niece is going to love it. Like, she's going to grow up watching these movies and be into it. And that to me is like, it doesn't really have to do with, I always hate feeling like some marketing magic has hooked me in, but I think more than just the marketing is that feeling of like, no, this is, it is connected to the universe I grew up with. And it's, it's going to be for me and the kids. We're finally bridging that gap and, putting it all together again, which is like, maybe those prequels just felt sort of all over the map. Like, they turned me off because I thought they're just going to be for kids, and they, turned other people off. Cause like, for example, this is ridiculous. My niece does not like them. And
interesting.
Granted, it's it's the opinion of a 4-year-old, but when you say we're going to watch a Star Wars movie, and and her dad puts in one of those, she's like, "Where's Princess Leia?" She does not care, which is such a cool.
Queen Amidala doesn't do it for her?
No way, man.
Wow.
Which I think speaks so highly of that that new idea of the princess that George Lucas gave us, of like the princess that doesn't need to be rescued, you know, it's like she has to rescue herself from her rescuers.
Well, let's talk about that, because it's every possibility, in my opinion, that Daisy Ridley's character is the daughter of Han and Leia.
Right.
So she is essentially a princess herself. And we'll see. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that, you know, people that Lucas or Disney now wants to. That I'm pretty sure there are going to be some revelations in this trilogy that we will never see coming, a la I Am Your Father. I think when they set this up, they're like, what is the next version of that?
Yeah.
I think there's also some things that if you have a brain and you're paying enough attention, are probably coming. Like, you know, Daisy Ridley's probably, I'm assuming, you know, Han and Leia's daughter, for whatever reason, like abandoned on this planet. I'm also thinking that Kylo Ren might be her brother. You know, and I hope to God it's not I am your brother. I hope that's not a end
I am your brother.
I hope that will be as bad as, oh, you haven't seen it yet, but that will be as bad as Darth Vader at the end of Revenge of the Sith going, no, you know, which is basically that one moment. Yeah. That whole movie was badass until that moment. And then you're like, oh God, it's like they just couldn't end on a good note. It's like, no. And you have James Earl Jones, you know, coming back, doing his damnedest to give that some gravity. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh God. But all that to be said, couple of the things about the new, and it's interesting as we talk to the first story on the top of IO9, literally in the last 5 minutes, what are you most excited for in The Force Awakens? And I'm watching they've got an animated GIF of TIE fighters fighting. There's a couple things that don't get reported on a lot as far as the new movies go that I think, you know, obviously there's the nostalgia factor. It's not even like they're hinting at Han. They put freaking Harrison Ford in the costume with Chewie in the movie, right? Yeah. So it's like they are, I mean, J.J. Abrams and when I say J.J. Abrams, I mean the Star Wars team, Kathleen Kennedy, the whole pack of them. We're like, we are going to connect this, you know, with iron chains to the original series in a way that will be meaningful for everybody. But I also think things like, you know, you don't hear, you know, the prequels turned what was a mysterious sort of, you know, samurai-like warrior class of the Jedi that was, you know, not really explained, like the Force. It's not really, it's more mysterious. There's something more, and your imagination can fill in the gaps any way you want. It went from that to, oh no, it's all science. Midichlorians are a form of bacteria that can inhabit you, and that's what you get your Force sensitivity from. And it's all they turned it into like a, you know, almost like a religion in the worst sense. You know, it went from mystery and entry to like, this is what it is, and here's who we are, and it's dogma if you say if you do these things. And I feel like we're getting kind of back to some of that mysterious kind of like, what is the Force? Like, is there, you know, even to the point where in the trailer, Han Solo is like, it's real. You know, it's like people had kind of forgotten, like, what are Jedi? What is the Force? Is it, you know, can anybody be a Jedi? Does it have to just be these people who have, you know, genetic superiority? Like, what is it?
Yeah.
That I think plays a huge is a huge factor in just my interest, because it really, that when they framed it in that way, and it's such a simple line where just Han Solo goes, it's all real, it's all true. Yeah. Like that line sort of in my head made it click and go, oh, that's where we're back in that mode again of, you know, there's this like serious, like, you know, hard, you know, there's a military conflict with a military resolution that's, you know, a tried and true battle kind of like that exists. But over here, we're also playing this other very mysterious kind of game of families and intrigue, and, you know, we don't, you know, powers that we can't explain. And like, that's all back too. And I am, that's what's fueling my excitement.
Yeah.
And granted too, you know, JJ and company, you know, they've gone out of their way to make everything practical. You know, even though, I mean, there's a crap ton of CGI in this thing for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, wherever they can, they put in a practical effect. So I don't know. I'm really, hang on just a second here. I was trolling through the IO9 comments, looking to see what other people are saying. I need to not do that. Do you think though, I mean, let me ask you this, speaking of the new movies, Do you think we're getting too much? Are they going to burn us out? Because the way the schedule looks, and we can pop the schedule in the show notes as well. The way the schedule looks, we're going to have a Star Wars movie every year until at least 2020. Is that overload? Is there no such thing as too much when it comes to Star Wars? What are your personal thoughts?
I had not seen that schedule until you shared it. I looked at it before we started recording. And honestly, I think I was kind of a little excited, but it was easy to go, well, I'm not going to care about this Rebel One garbage or whatever it's called. But I hate to give like some vague, like, well, time will tell. But there's definitely a lot riding on The Force Awakens. And,
yeah, but you say that like that sort of presupposes it may not do well. It's going to be the biggest.
Oh, it's going to be huge, but I don't know. It's I got my fingers crossed for a good movie, but if it has some, like what my friend Todd likes to point out, that all J.J. Abrams movies have this like weird twist right at the end, and you're like, that came out of nowhere. And it's not doesn't necessarily make you feel like things resolved.
Do you think that's going to be the reveal of Luke? Because he has been absent from all the materials, and I'm wondering, like, are they saving that for a big end of the movie? Like, and he steps out of the shadows or something at the end.
God, I hope not. I hope he's like a part of the movie.
What if they find out that Luke is dead and his Force ghost appears at the end?
Obi-Wan and
yeah. So the entire time you think we're trying to find Luke, and they show up at the planet where he might be, but instead, like, a blue shimmering version of him appears. Like, oh shit, he's been dead this whole time. Like, what if it's that?
I have not pondered all of these possibilities. It's when you ask the question about, like, is it too many movies? I actually thought you were going to go to, have we gone from not hearing enough about this movie to hearing so much in the last 2 weeks before it comes out? I think to me that all sort of feeds together of like, God, when does the Star Wars burnout occur?
Well, they've been asking that about Marvel now for 5 years, and we still haven't quite hit it yet, although it looks like it might be on the horizon.
Well, there's definitely, I think Marvel's got the right idea, and of course that's Disney, as well, like of, there's gonna be a shift. There's gonna be the Captain America Civil War, and then at that point on, there's gonna sort of be a new set of heroes, as far as I understand. We're not gonna.
Well, and they're exploring new territory. Like Doctor Strange is not going to be like anything you've seen as a movie.
Right.
Black Panther is going to be a totally different kind of movie. Like, they're going in these different creative directions. I'll just join you in saying time will tell, because I'll see all of these unless I have a good reason not to. I'll see, I'll go, and they're coming out, and the fact they're doing one a year is a good move. I'm intrigued that they're bouncing around between summer and December, and they're not just locking in every December between now and 2020.
I thought the same thing. Yeah.
You'd think that, especially with Lord of the Rings, one of the successes of that strategy was you knew 3 years in a row, every year, exactly the same time, a new Lord of the Rings was coming out. So you can build your expectations around that, and you can end your year knowing, I'm going to see the next Lord of the Rings this year, and build your family friend get-togethers and all that crucial stuff. Well,
and maybe I'm I don't know exactly if I'm misremembering this or not, but I know for a fact that when they announced there would be a third Hobbit movie, they said it's going to come out 6 months later. So
you're right. Yeah, it's supposed to be a summer.
It's going to come in December, and number 3 is going to be in May,
like a Back to the Future.
And then that didn't happen.
Yeah,
right. They pushed that to December, and I kind of think that one of the things they're doing with Star Wars is we're getting Force Awakens, then we're getting this anthology part, and I don't even know why they're starting with like whatever it's called, Rebel One or Force One or whatever that thing is, Rogue One. That's what it is. I don't know why they're starting with that instead of like the Han Solo movie or the Boba Fett one, because I just don't know that people are going to be that interested in Rogue One. But anyway, then Episode 8 is slated for May of 2018 or something.
It's not even like
they're not giving, since they know they can't have Episode 8 out next year. Yeah. It's like they're trying to get it out as soon as possible after that.
Yeah,
that was kind of my impression of like they know the anthology is not really going to be a good placeholder. But I almost wish they'd flip flop it. Like, just put the canon movies out in December and then put the anthologies out in the summer.
I was just going to say that, like that. And that would give them a different tone and a different feel. You go into the summer ones thinking, oh, this is a different kind. I mean, call me crazy, but I really feel like the time in which you release content, whether it be music, a book, a movie, it really plays in on the perception of the people watching it. Like I could never imagine Lord of the Rings coming out in the summertime. It would it would feel like a completely different movie. But the fact that it was during Christmas and there was I don't know, you're with family and friends and just this feeling of that with, you got these other group of friends going on this adventure. Like it felt like a Christmassy, and not that it was Christmas in tone or theme, but like it just had that vibe, just felt like it belonged to that time of the year. So I can't imagine.
I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy, like if that had come out at Thanksgiving, who would have cared?
Yeah, it would have been.
Not that we wouldn't have cared, but it wouldn't have had that feel of like, that was like such a fun summer movie, Pacific Rim, like things like that are like, that they are defined a lot by where they fall on the calendar, I think. So.
And I'm surprised. I think more than anything, that's the most baffling thing about just when they're putting these out. And I'm sure a lot of it is, well, we're Disney and we own, 2 other gigantic franchises in Pixar and Marvel, and we already have those other slots taken and we don't want to cannibalize our own stuff. Maybe that's part of it. I mean, at this juncture, when you're Disney, you have to look at the calendar and go, oh God, like where do we put anything? I mean, you own so much successful stuff. Like, what do you do? So maybe
it almost feels to me like with Force Awakens, not that they've rushed it, but from the time from announcement to final like production was really quick.
You think so?
And I'm sure that it was in development before that, but they didn't even announce JJ being on board, I think, until 2013.
That's true.
So,
but they took a big gap when Harrison Ford got injured. So it feels like, to me, it feels like this has been bubbling for a while. I mean, they announced the film sale in 2012.
Coming, right? We just didn't have JJ confirmed, so I'm sure he was working. But in light of like some Hobbit information that's come out recently, like I guess when the Blu-ray of Five Armies came out, Peter Jackson talked about how they didn't wind the clock back to make The Hobbit once Del Toro dropped off. And he makes this comment about, we worked on Lord of the Rings pre-production for 3 years before we had a camera, on set. Yeah. So for Hobbit to ramp up in a few months, was like extraordinary. And so you think about that, like in terms of Star Wars, I mean, they built a Millennium Falcon and they must have, built it really damn quick. Was the story already done before JJ came on, and were the people building sets before he came on? Or
let's be honest, this is one of the few, if not the only movie in the world that there is no budget ceiling. Like,
right, true.
Whatever you need to make it happen, go, do it. Here's the thing, though. Lawrence Kasdan, J.J. Abrams, and Michael Arndt wrote the screenplay. So J.J. was intimately involved with the writing. I mean, Kasdan might have had like an outline, but like they jumped in. You make a good point, though, with all the practical stuff going on. That's a big boatload of stuff that had to be done to shoot this thing.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's a case of there. And I can't imagine I can't imagine what the final true, not the PR released budget number, but the final true budget number for this thing actually was. Because it's like when you say money is this is kind of one of them, money is no object kind of. I mean, Disney knows it's going to recoup in the first hour of ticket sales. Disney has probably recouped everything they need just to make this thing.
Well, have you seen this news about how they're downplaying the pre-sales because they've already made 50 million plus in pre-sales.
Yeah.
So they've already made like half of what last week's top box office did,
Just in pre-sales. Yeah. I mean, when was the last time a movie had that high? I mean, it's sold out as like a concert, like sold out in pre-sales. Like that's, I wonder, are we going to get to the point where movies maybe Star Wars is the first one to do it, where we have, just like with concerts, you have to buy VIP tickets that have like,
that's what we're doing, right? I mean, that's why you're talking about, waiting to see it at the Alamo Drafthouse and stuff like.
But I mean, every ticket bought is the same price. You can, the ticket for row 5 center seat is the same price as the ticket for back of the theater. What if we get to the point? What if theaters decide to start tiering it? And for $80, you get the ticket and you get like this and you get like an autograph, like lithograph or something. You're like, what if that, God, we may be headed. I would love to check back in like 2 years from now and see if that hasn't, if Regal Cinemas hasn't decided that that's a new way to roll. Because the reason I bring this up is name one other movie where people would literally pay anything to see it opening night. And I mean anything, like $200 for a ticket. Like what other movie is that going to happen with besides this one?
Yeah, nothing. I mean, I really can't think of anything that would be remotely like that. Like, there's certainly nothing I've felt that way about. And the other side of that is that everyone I know who's not going on opening night to this is so guarded about what they're learning about the movie. Like already we're all sort of tense of like, that week after, like that week between the 18th and whenever we get to see it.
I am subconsciously guilty of this. I didn't even think about it. I have been, well, part of it is they've been, I don't know how the hell they have kept so much of this secret. Like it is only what you see in the trailers and fan speculation. And there has, with almost every movie, there's like a leaked set. I mean, good God, the third Batman movie, the third Nolan Batman movie, like you saw half of it online before it even came out. Cause every shot, like you saw Bane and Batman fighting in the snow, and some fan shot it from like a business office window in Chicago. So it's like you saw, with the exception of one Luke Skywalker production shot that got promptly deleted. That's the only thing I've ever seen out of plan, as it were. Yeah. And so like part of that, I think I just subconsciously, I'm like, well, I don't want to know. Like usually I'll be on morning IO9's morning spoilers. I'm on almost every day. And I'm one of those guys who like, I have such low confidence in being truly dazzled anymore that I would rather know the ending, and then just so I know my I'm like, okay, cool. That's where so it's going to end like I want. Then it's the enjoyment is seeing how they execute that, So that's kind of where I've gotten to in my life, where I'm like, I'm so tired of being burned, like Lost and everything since it has threw me so off. And I'm like, I can't, I'll read the ending to make sure this is at least going to be worth it. And then I'll be like, okay, now the journey will be fun. Star Wars, I'm kind of like, I want to be truly sort of surprised and go in and enjoy it like a movie, like we used to. So again, going back to kind of the fervor, I think a lot of it was just how deftly they're playing their marketing hand. They're making this feel like an old school release, like before the internet, like how were movies, you didn't know what if, Marty and Doc were going to make it back, back to the present. Like you just didn't you didn't even know who Marty and Doc were going into the first Back to the Future movie. Like now, God, if you imagine them releasing Back to the Future today, like you'd see, Jesus Christ, you'd see like,
oh, here's Michael J. Fox in old person makeup. So we know that he's going to, they're going to have an old version of him. Or,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or there's Jon Snow walking around in Ireland.
That's a whole other podcast. We got to do that.
Part of that, though, that I'm using that to lead in is that that we're not left with any like cliffhangers. Which is such a looking at it is that the last movies we saw were the prequels, and we know what happened after them.
Oh, you're right.
They were the original trilogy. So we're all kind of in brand new territory with this, which is the problem that Game of Thrones has is that they're constantly trying to stop spoilers because they're constantly leaving things on ridiculous cliffhangers and stuff like that people want answered, and it's like, well, we know what happened after the last movies.
I wonder how self-contained these are going to be, by the way, because you think back to the original Star Wars movie, you didn't need Empire Strikes Back. You could have watched Star Wars and there could have been nothing else after, and it would have been just as enjoyable, and it would have started and ended, and there you go. But the fact that it was, and it's almost odd that happened knowing that Lucas wanted to make 2 more from the get-go. Yeah. Right? Like, it's weird that Star Wars 1 ended so the resolution was so complete, like they get awarded and then the story's over. Whereas obviously 2, there's a massive cliffhanger at the end of 2 that was intentionally put there. I wonder if Force Awakens is going to have a nice tidy ending that, suggests more, or if it's going to be a, to be continued.
Well, do we know that Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher are coming back in 8 and 9, or are they only signed up for 7?
That's a great question. I think I saw something that suggests they'll be involved somehow, but I mean, they haven't even started filming yet, so I don't even know. I mean, they started filming Rogue One, but they haven't started episode 8, I don't think. So it's hard to say. I mean, clearly these 3 movies are going to attach to each other structurally somehow. The question is just going to be, can they stand alone as well? Or is it going to be, do you have to watch all 3 to really, I mean, is it going to be a trilogy in that sense?
Well, hopefully it's going to be like the Star Trek movies. Although it really does feel like such a different universe, even when I think of that. But hopefully it'll be like that, where it really, restores the balance. Like, we're back in the Star Wars universe, and then we don't have to sort of worry about the sequel. Kind of,
okay.
Like when the prequels came out, we knew, well, there's 2 more, and I think that was like, we know that now, but I just in some other, I don't know. It just seemed like a much, much higher stakes then. Maybe it was because we knew we had 4, 5, 6, so we knew he had to do 1, 2, 3. He wasn't just going to do 1 or 1 and 2 or something. Yeah, but do you think
is the audience so conditioned now for that mid-credits tag? Has Marvel kind of ruined us by insisting that, oh no, there's always something more? And is that by virtue of it being a Disney property, is there pressure for you guys, for there to be a mid-credits reveal or a post-credits reveal that everybody sits around and waits for? Or is it going to be old school in the fact that, like, no, we don't do that. That wasn't how the originals were, and we're not going to mess with that. Like, I wonder which way they'll take it.
I wish they would just cut that shit out. It is so stupid. Those tags. I mean, on one hand, I get that it's clever. It's it's a way of bridging the movies but still leaving the movie to be a standalone, Mm-hmm. But, man, sometimes it's frustrating to like just sit there and think, okay, what, what are we going to get this time? And then when it's not an actual plot device that gets you into the next movie or hints at it, it's just like a zinger that they put in at the end. Ugh, it drives me crazy.
I think it pisses DC off too, because I think a lot of people sat around Man of Steel waiting. It was funny. I went to Man of Steel, and there was even a sign. There was a sign put on the door that says no mid-credits or post-credits scene is included. Just because I think it had a lot of people sitting around waiting and then bitching as they came out of the theater, like, where is it? And then the theater's like, we didn't make this. Like we just showed this. So I think they're just like, just to alleviate some of that consternation. But it's interesting. Like, I don't know, there's so many ways the story could go. I could easily see there being, I think it will probably be a nice combination of the core story of the movie is wrapped up, but there is clearly a bigger mystery unfolding that will be alluded to. And you know what? Phantom Menace actually did do that. I never even thought of that. Phantom Menace, you watch it start to finish, and it works as a standalone story. It leaves there's a big question mark over a couple of things, but you don't necessarily, it's not like, cut to black.
Right.
To be continued. It's like, to be continued, but you enjoy this for what it is.
Well, do you think, did Attack of the Clones not have that? Or did it wrap up as well? Or maybe you just don't even remember. Maybe you've wiped that out of your memory.
Attack of the Clones definitely insisted a conclusion. Although it's so bad, it's hard to even think about Attack of the Clones that way, because it's just so clunky and just ugh. You think about, as soon as I'll tell you I now that you bring up Attack of the Clones, the one time I could feel what you felt for the new editions was when I saw Phantom Menace again on DVD, and they had replaced, in the original version of Phantom Menace, keep in mind, 1999.
They replaced something from theater to DVD?
Yes. Yoda was the puppet. And then I think the first versions or the first run of DVDs had him as the puppet. But since then, if you go buy the Phantom Menace on iTunes or Amazon or whatever, it's going to be digital Yoda. Because in Attack of the Clones, and Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, Yoda was digital. In Phantom Menace, he's the puppet. And I'm like, when you take a Muppet and you make it a digital thing like that, I see why they did it in Attack of the Clones, but like going back and rewatching Phantom Menace, and you can go Google it, you'll see before and after shots, and it's just like, no, no, he's meant to be that. Like, don't mess with Yoda. Like, and it's not even that they digitizing him is fine, but they digitized him to look so different. Like the digitized version of Yoda looks incredibly different than the puppet version that you saw on screen. So it's like the same scene and you're like, what's wrong? He has more hair, his head is like contoured differently. Like he's got different like clothing material. Like it's a very different looking kind of character. So I'm just like, Oh.
Wow. Yeah, I've already Googled that. I will be watching that because I can't believe that they did even like how petty and ridiculous or something.
It's obnoxious. Let me ask you this. We got to start wrapping this up. Let me ask you this though.
Sure.
Do you like that there is a Kevin Feige brand manager sort of position in Kathleen Kennedy over Star Wars? Do you think that will serve it well? And I'll add on to that. It seems that they are replicating not only the model of the original series where there's like George Lucas is kind of in essence, George Lucas was the brand manager, if you will, of the first three, and he had other people. It's modeling that, but it's also modeling the Marvel situation where they bring in, newer directors. I mean, J.J. is a little bit, is obviously more high profile, but Rian Johnson's still fairly new. There's a lot of they're bringing in different talent to sculpt a different vision, but there's still like a cohesive brand and story that's being adhered to. Do you think that will serve this well?
Well, I've heard her name a lot, and I just don't know. I didn't know too much about her role and everything, but I definitely think that's the way to approach it. Just given, especially what we just talked about with the George Lucas being the like only guy making the calls on the prequels, because to me that was one of the biggest stories that came out of the prequels was looking back at the original trilogy and going, oh, Lucas didn't direct these. He didn't write them solo, and at least the way I'd always heard it was that Lawrence Kasdan was such a huge like engine in those of like getting them together and stuff. And so you telling me about Gary Kurtz was like, that was just something that kind of gotten lost in the shuffle. I didn't really know.
Do you know Lawrence Kasdan was the one who said it's I think it was him. It was going to be originally Revenge of the Jedi. And he's like, Jedi don't take revenge. That's what the Sith is, which is why it's interesting that it's Revenge of the Sith. I kind of thought that was a nice symmetry, but it's Lawrence Kasdan's like the one who's like, and he's funny too, because he's saying it like while there's a Revenge of the Jedi poster, like, they probably made a handful of them before they changed the marketing, but like there's a Revenge of the Jedi poster behind him. In the documentary. But
I haven't seen that, but I know there was like a sort of artsy theater that I went to in Chicago that had one of those Revenge of the Jedi posters in it. And it was like, oh my God, where did you get this?
There's a weird BioShock Infinite, one of my favorite games. I'm not a huge gamer, but I love that game. It deals with multiple realities quite a bit. Like that's a central tenet. And in one of they open a tear into another reality of like 1980s Earth. And that's the marquee on the movie theater says Revenge of the Jedi. And I'm just like, oh, that's great. That's a great little shout out.
I mean, you bring up the symmetry between the movies, and to give such huge credit to George Lucas is that, now I'm going to lose the exact term that he's used, but I think he called them poetic. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but there was such a symmetry between the originals and the prequels, like in terms of like which character was shot from which angle at which scene, and there's at least one remix that you can find online that I'm pretty sure it's called Star Wars Poetry, which has sort of frame by frame on the original versus the prequel, and where you're seeing like say Luke and Obi-Wan have the exact same movement and shot and everything, and so as much as we deride these prequels or something, there really was a care put into them.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe Lucas wasn't the best handler of human emotion or director of human emotion stuff, but he definitely had that director's vision of, I want these three things to look like the other three things that I directed, or that I had a hand in, and definitely echo that across. And so, yeah, it was absolutely, I think Revenge of the Sith was absolutely an echo of that, of saying like we're going to call this Revenge of the Jedi, and we didn't, and now we're going to call its twin Revenge of the Sith. So
yeah. Well, that just goes back. I mean, going back to kind of my other question too, like, Kathleen Kennedy, she's experienced. I mean, she's experienced. She's been around. She's part of Spielberg's production company for the longest time. Like, she knows her stuff. I think it shows great wisdom. And as much as I hate Disney as like being so big and so so bitchy and evil about copyrights and trademarks and things, they understand how to manage franchises. Like you got to give them credit, like, for buying Pixar and being like, they could have absorbed Pixar completely into the fold. Right. And they're like, no, it remains exactly as it is. John Lasseter is like the brand manager of Pixar. We're going to let it stay exact. We're not going to mess it. We're just going to reap all the rewards and plug it into all our other outlets and channels and platforms that we can. Marvel, same thing. Like, this is the guy who's in charge of this, the film side of things, at least. Like, and and Star Wars seems to be the same way. I sort of like it. It makes it incredibly desirable to be one of those people, because, like, how much goddamn fun must you have if you are Feige or Kathleen Kennedy, to basically be like, I don't have to necessarily do a lot of the on the ground work. I mean, I'm sure it's an incredibly taxing job to do what she does, but to basically be like, I get to influence these stories, but other people are going to fully execute them, and I get to sort of stay on and basically be like a super fan almost, at the end of the day, and really make sure everything stays together and stays humming, and everyone has the money and the resources they need to do their jobs. But,
yeah, I love that idea of that role of like the ombudsman or whatever that's going to sort of oversee the universe and make sure that, we're all operating towards the same goal. And so I think that's it's a really cool thing. And we've brought up Feige before, and I think we have not mentioned Avi Arad, who was he was Marvel's like go-to producer for so much. Like, he was involved in all the Marvel movies before the MCU as we know it existed. So he was actually working across the studios. As far as I understand, like, he was involved in not only the X-Men movies with Fox, but the Spider-Man movies with, Tobey Maguire over at Sony, and the Hulk movie. And like, so he was kind of, I think, really instrumental, at least as far as I recall, was instrumental in making sure when that generation of Marvel movies came out that they reflected the comics, not like, you're not living in we're not seeing a different universe on screen that we see in the comic books. Mm-hmm. And then once, Marvel Studios was born and they rolled all that in, I think he may have been involved in the first few, but I don't think he's in the picture anymore. I think Feige sort of took that over, but it sounds like, I mean, it sounds like a fun role to be in, but it also seems like such an essential role for maintaining a franchise and making sure that, like, we're all on the same page here.
Well, especially when there's ancillary. I mean, like, for both, we're not just talking about movies. We're talking about TV shows, animated series, comics, games, licensing. Like, there's so much involved in these properties now that on both sides. And you could even throw, I mean, on a smaller level, you could throw the Jim Henson Company in there too. That was, that always goes overlooked as a Disney acquisition, but that was around the same time. It may have even predated Pixar, maybe. No, I think it came right after Pixar, but they bought the Jim Henson Company too. So it's like, there's so much involved in kind of being that, that overseer, the steward of Gondor, as Mark Bernardin said on Fat Man and Batman. I really like that. It's like, that's essentially, and there's so many things you can do, but as we were talking, I was going back, and yes, you look at the writing credits on the first three, on the original trilogy, and George Lucas's name is in there, but there's a bunch of other, Lawrence Kasdan's involved, obviously, and there's a couple others. And you look at Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Sith, and it's George Lucas, and he had like one other guy on Attack of the Clones, but it was him. It's basically him every step of the way.
Well, and just because it needs to be said, and it's not totally topical for this moment in our conversation, but I gotta say, one of the problems with those prequels has nothing to do with Jar Jar or the digital effects or whatever. It's just that the stories about government bureaucracy are boring.
Yeah.
Like, that was such a problem, was that we totally removed this group of rebels, fighting an imperial force and turned it into like
a trade dispute.
What are they called? Like, procedural dramas or something. It's like a Law and Order of space or something. Let's have our trade representatives meet with the new senator, who's also a queen, but she got elected to be queen. Nobody really understands that, but whatever. Let's waste a lot of time on it. Oh man, I think it was The Simpsons did a parody of that, like that was just dead on. Like after that first movie, that like where they go to see it, and it's just like all this arguing over trade bills or something.
Keep in mind, I do kind of, it was kind of neat to see, because if you're a writer, or if you have, if you like a story and you start to really think about it, you're like, I wonder how they do keep, what is the law and order of this system? Like, is there an empire? How does it work? Where did it come from? Like, how did, and so you kind of want to see some of those details, but we could have done without all that. There's a lot of stuff we could have done without that. It would have made a tighter movie. I don't know. I direct anybody who has true problems with the prequel. There's just go Google, or go to YouTube and type in like a better version of the prequels. And there's a guy, I forget his name. It blew up. It's got, millions of hits, but it's a guy walking you through what an ideal version of the prequels would be. And I think he goes movie by movie, I think he may even have like a supercut where he basically walks you through what the story should have been. And he uses like screenshots and stuff. And his version is so damn good. And you're just like, it just makes you more mad because you're like, how did they miss this? And he makes it more about Obi-Wan's journey, and Anakin is there at first, but doesn't come in until later. And so, like, Phantom Menace would have been more about Obi-Wan's journey and kind of that transition from student to teacher. And it's much more about that. I don't know, but go find that if you're listening and you're like, I want to delve. I want to just sort of swim around in what could have been. Like, go find that video and watch it. It's really good.
Is the one that you're referring to the one where he's taken all three and made it into one 2-hour movie?
That
or are they all separate? Because there's so many remixes, and I'm thinking like we should put
a remix. No, it's not a remix. It's him. It's literally a shot of him talking to the camera while animations and stuff, and he walks you through. And then it goes from voiceover, but it kind of cuts back to the guy explaining to you like what his version of it should have been.
Right. What is it? This isn't the 7-part review of it, is it? Do you remember that? This guy did this epic 70-minute review that before YouTube had unlimited time, he had to split it up into 7-10-minute reviews.
No, and now I can't. Okay. Here we go. It's type in what if Star Wars Episode 1 was good. And the guy's got a beard. He's got a beard and he's talking against a green screen, but so there's 3 videos. So what if Star Wars Episode 1, 2, and 3 were good?
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm looking. Yeah, there we go.
Well, we'll definitely link this in the show notes, along with that Star Wars poetry video, which I found, and some other things that we talked about when we were talking about all this stuff. So, because I think we've got so many cool links that if you haven't seen them, there's a unreal amount of Star Wars remixes and re-edits and reviews, and do
you think? Well, let me kind of throw this at you too. Do you think one of the reasons for its long-standing popularity is because there is so much fan content that hasn't been?
I think that is such a huge point, and it's really hard to connect those dots except from just a gut feeling way. Yeah. But I definitely think so, and I think part of the Disney acquisition has been sort of corporatizing a lot of that, because I know for a long time, I'd sort of pointed this out when we were riffing, that there was a long-running Star Wars series from Dark Horse Comics that to me were always sort of the real dedicated fans, for the adults, there's the Dark Horse Star Wars stuff, and there were novels and all that kind of crap. But Marvel did, when Disney got it, Marvel put out a Star Wars line of comics that are doing really well, and they're they look beautiful and they're great quality and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But they definitely maybe brought some of that outer edges of creation in, a little bit more into the house. But putting all that aside, there's so many fan films, and there's so many, just cosplay groups. There's the 501st Legion, and and the I can't remember the Rebels right now, but they have one, and it's like all of that community has fed into this existing for so long in this way, which is just amazing to me, because I don't know, I just don't. I don't know that you see that like literally in that same way. I mean, when you point to it like with comic books or something, yeah, but I mean, Batman's been around for 70 years or something.
Yeah,
I mean, this is Star Wars. It was started 40 years ago. Like,
there's an interesting point though. I mean, like you talk about, is there too much? I mean, you raise a great point. Batman has been around for forever, and I mean, they're going to keep making Batman movies. So maybe, I mean, it's as long as they don't mess it up, which I think in the short term they're more than fine. I don't see that. I think everybody's universally very excited about all of this. I mean, even I'm sure George Lucas at some point too was just like, he's got to be a little bit happy that
he should be.
It was in such good hands. It's not like,
he is such a legend, and what he has given us is so much. The good things that he has done so outweigh the nitpicky little crap that we have problems with. That there's just no. I mean, even if when I go to watch these prequels, if I just hate the crap out of them, I'm still not going to think like, oh, George Lucas, you ruined my childhood. I'm going to be like, well, whatever. I mean, you make a lot of art. Some of it isn't as good. Whatever. Like, it's just he's done so much cool stuff. Like, he's made modern movies.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we wouldn't have the Red Epic or DSLRs in general, not because of him, but he was. I mean, keep in mind, he developed whatever that version of the Sony digital camera was. He was the first, I think, to actually do a full movie start to finish with a digital camera without film.
Yeah.
And that I'm going to get yelled at by somebody who's like, no. Somebody with a mini DV cam. I'm sure. I know there was like a Swedish or Icelandic like film movement where they shot it all on like DSLRs or VHS tapes. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like professional grade, total film replacement, high budget movie. I think Attack of the Clones was the first to do it.
Well, it takes somebody like Lucas of that stature to modernize something so quickly, and to like cause it to be adopted. I mean, that's what Peter Jackson did. With the red cameras on The Hobbit, it just pushed that envelope until nobody could ignore it anymore. Like,
well, it helps too when you have the heavy hitting money that is behind a massively popular franchise too. So
right. I mean, you got to have that. Like, until that, it's all just like it's the outlier of success or whatever. But yeah, I mean, just Lucas's like contributions to filmmaking are so vast that I can't, he should feel so totally relieved that he doesn't have to be the one, accepting blame for all the stupid nitpicky stuff that people are absolutely going to find in all of the movies that come up,
Were I him, I would be, I mean, this is me, but were I him, I would be delighted to be like, here's this thing that I imagined 40 years ago that I got to make, but now they're going to make more than I ever could. I can just go as a fan and enjoy this thing that is still that I thought up, that will feel new to me, but it's still the thing that I thought up. Like that's got to be the sweetest position to be in, where it's like, and not only that, it's like, here are these people who freaking love the original thing that I created so much, they're going to honor it so truthfully and faithfully that they're going to put all these different spins on characters that I thought up, and I get to watch them in totally new adventures. Like, it's got to be that has to be the ultimate version of winning. Like, money aside, I mean, the dude's worth billions, but like, just from a creatively satisfying standpoint, to go, I made this, and J.K. Rowling's, she's writing the I was going to say Beasts of the Southern Wild. What's the Harry Potter extension series they're doing? Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them.
Okay.
But I would say the same thing about her. So like, there's a whole new run of Harry Potter, like, not prequels, but like early history Harry Potter movies coming out. And, if she wasn't involved with writing them, I would imagine it would be the same thing, where it's like, here's this thing that I thought up that didn't even exist. It was just in my head that I got to make for a while. And now somebody else is making it incredibly loyally. And I get to watch. I mean, the fact that the new content doesn't have to come from my head, but I still get to appreciate it. And it's done at the highest level. Like, that's, God, there's something so wonderful. And just like, I would want that for myself if I could ever find it. Like, that would be amazing.
Right. And this idea too that like, I'd hate to feel that he's he's sort of bowed out because of criticism of the prequels. As grumpy as I may have been about them at the time, I didn't like take to the internet and bitch about the prequels at the time. I just didn't go see them, you know. But the example that springs to mind immediately is when we saw that first trailer for The Force Awakens, and immediately people were like, "Why the fuck does that R2 unit just roll around like that?"
Oh, jeez.
It's like, oh my God, people, it's a sci-fi fantasy epic. We don't care about the physics of this rolling R2 droid. Like people are going to nitpick whatever you do in this universe. You know, it's so detailed anyway. Like, it's much better for Lucas to step back and just let some other people play in the sandbox for a while, so that Stan Lee's a great example of that. Like, Stan Lee gets to basically go and, he may secretly hate like all the new MCU movies, but like every time he talks about it, he's like, "Oh, isn't it incredible? Captain America on the screen." Oh yeah.
With a budget that he would have never even imagined, like the success of these things that he put on, that he dreamed up in his head, like all of a sudden live in their own, realistic worlds. Like, and he gets to be alive to see that. Like, oh my God, this thing that I thought up, here it is. And like, and I'm sure there's a whole dark side to this where George Lucas is just like, "You don't understand. I can't even go out with somebody yelling at me about Jar Jar Binks." Like, and now he can just be like, "Fuck it, you guys, I don't, it's not me anymore. I don't have to deal with it. Like, it's not my problem." I think part of it too is he's long talked about doing, smaller indie movies again, 45 years later.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, he did that Red Tails movie like 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh yeah, exactly.
That wasn't small so much, but I think he mentioned, he's like, now I don't have to deal with Star Wars anymore. Or the business aspect. I could just go make weird little quirky movies and just do that, which, we'll see if it happens.
I think when the prequels came out, there was this other line that came out in the marketing of Lucas saying, I waited all this time to do them right, and I'm finally going to tell the story. But in my mind, it's like, you know what? If you had the story to tell the prequels and then 7, 8, 9, you would have just done it in the 80s. Yeah. Like, I really don't buy that excuse of like he was waiting for the technology. I mean, maybe in some way, but I just, as a person who sits down and tries to write stories, like, if you're really interested in telling the story, like, you're just going to sit down and write it anyway. So you're not necessarily waiting for the better typewriter to come along or whatever, So I really think that, we kind of like, he contributed so much, and that's kind of where, where his contributions have, where they lay, for lack of a better term. Like, they're, I hate to say he's done with it. Maybe he's still contributing to the Star Wars universe in different ways, but I don't think he really had that energy to go do these 3 more movies. Yeah. That even though he wanted to, even though he had talked about them, if he'd, like I said, if he'd had the ideas for them, I think they already would have been made.
Yeah. So. Well, on that note, I think it's a great place to wrap up. I think we could, I do want to come back. If you're listening, there may be a third. We can definitely split this thing into 2. I mean, for sure. But I think there's a third episode. If you go and see at least Revenge of the Sith, because I kind of held back some of my notes just because I didn't want to spoil it for you. But also, I think there's a discussion there about that movie and what works and what doesn't. Because I remember walking out of that movie, and it's been 10 years. It was 2005, and I remember I and a couple people from Echo went and saw it. I walked out of that movie distinctly like excited, but also like, because there was enough stuff that was just like, oh man, but excited because it really delivered for the first time of any of those prequels, like a lot of stuff that I was hoping for. I mean, there's a lot of badass moments in that movie that I think, I'm glad are there, that a lot of people might, bristle at or something, but there's a lot of good acting. Hayden Christensen withstanding that, but just moments, things that you as a fan are like, oh my God, like just seeing. God, I don't even want to spoil. I don't want to spoil anything because you haven't even seen Attack of the Clones, so there's something I can't even reference without giving it away.
Well, I've totally given up any spoiler warning like liberty I might have. Like if you needed to ruin something, I would say ruin it. But I do like the idea that we do let's do a follow up when I've seen them, because I will watch them all before going into 7. I'm going to try to watch all 6.
Nice.
But
I should do that too. I should watch at least the original trilogy. I haven't seen it for a while. It's one of those movies that just, I don't know. I need to at least watch just the original Star Wars and just kind of wrap my head back in that world, because it'll give me a better way to compare, Force Awakens in terms of tone and everything, just to see how close it is.
Yeah, man, I thought this was a great conversation. I'm happy to talk about Star Wars some more. There's so much. We could literally just talk about this all the time and all the crazy stuff that we found on the internet about it.
Well, hopefully if you're listening, you enjoyed listening about Star Wars this whole time. If you are still listening, you're true saints. I mean, honestly, like I look at the clock every once in a while. I'm like, oh my God, it's been an hour. Oh my God, it's been 2 hours. Wow.
Oh, wow. I wasn't even keeping track. So I
know. I think we're at 2.5. If we started around 2, we started a little late. So about two and a quarter.
So basically if we go for another 30 minutes, we hit like Hobbit length for one film.
Exactly. And then we can come back and do a 4-hour like commentary track.
Director's commentary.
About our podcast.
So let's definitely split this into 2. That'll be cool.
There's a version where it's like, you hear that click in the background. That was when I was standing up to go get water. And it's like, we do a commentary track about I wonder if that's ever been done. I wonder if anyone's been so audacious to be like, download our podcast and coming next week, the commentary track to our podcast.
God, how awful. Although it would be hilarious to just have us in a room listening to a podcast and both of us cringing and giving our feedback on it, trying to talk over. Please don't listen to this part of the podcast. I sound like an ass.
It'd be a lot of cringing. Although there's something kind of Spinal Tapian about a commentary track for a podcast that I'm almost like that should happen at some point. Well, anyway, how do folks find you online if they're looking for you?
I am at HeyToddA on Twitter and HeyToddA.com. And you are?
I am at Taylor Trask, TAYLOR.
TRASK.
Yep, at Twitter. And you can also find me at TaylorTrask.com. Random postings on LinkedIn and Facebook and all that kind of stuff.
We are at ToddandTaylor.com, where you can find all of our episodes, because we now have 2 seasons and like maybe 14 episodes or so. We got a lot of episodes. It's good.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Man. Cool. So anyway, we'll talk to you all later. It's been good talking to you, sir. And
good talking to you as well. Good, a good conversation.
All righty. See you guys.
All right. Later.